Hello, you're watching Singapore Tonight. I'm Genevieve Wu. Singapore could see its GDP growth drop to -8%, says Minister Mentor Lee Kuan Yew. But he is confident the island state will recover faster than other nations. Mr. Lee was speaking at a dialogue session. With business information company Thomson Reuters. For more on the story, we're joined now by Imelda Saad from the newsroom. Imelda, what can you tell us?
Well, Jen, it is sobering news indeed. Singapore has projected that its economy will contract by 2% to 5% this year. But it seems we've got to be prepared for an even deeper contraction, given how exports have shrunk so suddenly. And yes, Jen, there was also a note of optimism from Mr. Lee. Mei Wong has more on that.
The world's dependent on the US, Europe and Japan economies to recover before the rest can see a pickup. And once that happens, Minister Mentor Lee says Singapore is able to bounce back much faster because 3.25 times of the country's GDP is in external trade. Mr. Lee says the city-state also has its reserves to thank for in surviving this economic crisis when he recounted his conversation with the head of the US National Economic Council, Larry Summers.
I looked at him and said, "Do you think we are an ordinary country? We are a little island. We've built this enormous superstructure through sheer hard work and with our wits. But we must expect, in the nature of the free market, that there will be such a crash. We never expected it so soon or so drastic."
Mr. Lee says Singapore set aside half of its earnings every year in good times.
We saved for the rainy day and the rains have come.
On whether Temasek's investment strategy has changed with the appointment of its new CEO, American Charles Goodyear, Mr. Lee says it'll depend on how the financial sector evolves. But he says the resignation of Temasek's CEO and Executive Director Ho Ching had nothing to do with the investment losses.
There was a cabinet paper which explained why Ho Ching wanted to retire. She thinks it was time. It's got nothing to do with bad investments because when you go in aggressively into the market, you must take the knocks when the knocks come.
During this financial downturn, Mr. Lee expects industries like the pharmaceutical to stay resilient. And that prompted the moderator to ask if he was equally bullish about the casinos in Singapore's upcoming integrated resorts, which drew much laughter.
I like your tie. It's got decks of cards on it.
Yeah.
Lots of money symbols.
This is cheering for our integrated resort. It was given to me by Steve Forbes.
Okay.
And I think that will provide about 10,000 jobs and increase Sands will give about 10,000 jobs, and that's 10,000 in Genting and Sentosa. It should increase the tourists and revenue, conventions and so on.
Mr. Lee asked that the state of the global economy will become clearer in about 9 months when the US economy is able to see the effects of its economic policies.
And Imelda, Mr. Lee also touched on the possibility of an early election. So will we be seeing hustings on the ground soon?
Well, Jen, to those eagerly anticipating a GE this year, you may be in for a disappointment. Mr. Lee said although he does not make the decision, the Prime Minister does. He does not see any purpose in having elections before 2011. Now, a lot, he said, will depend on how the financial crisis develops. He added Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong is feeling the pulse not of the people, but of the financial market and how it will impact the country's economy and employment situation. Now, the Minister Mentor was also asked if he would stand for elections, to which he replied it would depend if the Prime Minister thinks he's an asset or liability, and being 85 years old now, that would also depend on the Minister Mentor's state of health. Now, Singaporeans last went to the polls in May 2006, and a general election is not due until early 2012. Now, of course, there was speculation over an early election because of moves recently to revise the registers of voters and publish the boundaries of altered polling districts. Jen, back to you.
All right, thanks, Imelda. And to catch the highlights from the dialogue tomorrow night.